What's going on, guys? Got a little bit of a shop project slash shop tip video for you. Working on a little bit of a project here where I'm going to be adding a 4th axis rotary to my CNC router. And instead of installing a brand new driver, which would need an additional breakout board and parallel port card and all kinds of other things, I'm going to keep it relatively simple, and I'm going to use an existing axis, the A axis, which is slaved currently to the Y axis of my machine. And then what I'll be able to do ultimately is to position, the Z, X, Y, everything where I need it. And then I'll be able to, what I want to be able to do is unplug that A axis from this motor, plug it into my rotary stepper motor, and then go ahead and switch profiles in Mach 3 and use it as required. So in order to do that, I'm going to add some connectors. Right now, this is all hardwired straight back to the breakout board. I want to be able to break this circuit here with a connector or a plug, and be able to swap easily and efficiently as necessary. So in order to do that, there's several different connectors you can get for something like this. A lot of guys use aviator or aviation style connectors. There's other multi-pin, like automotive style connectors and this and that. The sky is kind of the limit there. What I've decided to use are called Deutsch DTP connectors, and they come in quite a pile of pieces here. Kind of looks complicated. It really isn't once you kind of get the steps down. But we'll just kind of go over the pieces here. You've got basically your female side. You can see a rubber gasket in there, as well as on the back. These are dust and mostly watertight. Here's the male side, again with the gasket or membrane on the back. There's where the pins click into. And then they have these wedge locks, which actually I've got one too many here. I bought a set of 4 of these. I think it's about $25. $25 for a set of 4, so they're relatively inexpensive, but once you get them installed, they're actually quite robust, easy to connect and disconnect as needed, and just a really good option for connectors. So we're going to set this additional wedge lock off to the side, but this one ultimately will fit into the male side, which actually takes the female pins, and then you've got the female side, which will take the male pins. This wedge lock goes down in there. We'll show you how that all goes together. And then here's the pins. These are 4 connector DT connections. So we got 4 each. There's a male pin as well as a female pin. And these are crimp on. Now, there are different styles of these pins that you can buy. There are nicer, higher quality pins. These are kind of a pressed or a rolled pin. They start off as basically this thickness of flat, sheet metal. And then they're rolled and pressed in a die. That's where you can kind of see how those, are formed together. And then on the back, you have your crimp connections or your crimps. There's actually 2 kinds. One is for the outer sheath of your conductor. That's these thinner, kind of sharper teeth here. And then the kind of squared off tooth or teeth is for your actual copper. Now, if you want to go a little bit of an extra mile, you can put a little bit of solder on here as well as heat shrink and everything else. But that's not really necessary for this application. So we're just going to keep it basic and simple. And we're going to use this style of ratcheting crimper, which kind of roll forms that crimp into the conductor really tightly and nicely. But there is a little bit of a technique for using these kinds and doing it well. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks there. One thing we are going to keep in mind, your conductor is going to plug into this, as you'll see. This is an open-ended tube. You can actually see all the way through that. So you do want to keep in mind that your conductor's not stripped back too far or inserted too far into this, because when your male pin is inserted and connected, If you have any conductor in there where it's not supposed to be, that's going to inhibit your connection. It's going to jam everything up or keep it from plugging in all the way or as easily. So that is something to keep in mind. Easiest way to avoid that, pre-connect them like this, and then you have kind of a built-in depth stop, for putting your female barrel pin onto your wire. So if I can give you any tips, that'll probably be the better one. And then we're actually going to make sure our machine's off, obviously. We don't want to short anything out. We're going to go ahead and just cut there. Now, I could have, started here, just cut the end off and connected it straight, to here. But these are smaller gauge wires. And I like these thicker stranded gauges. They crimp on a little tighter and better. And this will just be as easy. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to strip about 2 inches of this outer SO cable. This is 14 gauge, 4 conductor SO. We're just going to carefully take that outer sheath off. And you've got kind of this jute twine or rolled paper for added strength. We don't need that. We're going to cut that all the way flush. Make sure you don't actually get your white wire. There might be like a little thread as well. That's sometimes used for stripping that jacket back. We're not worried about that. So there's that. Now we're going to strip about 3/8 of an inch or so off the end of our conductors using the Knipex forged wire strippers, which in my opinion are probably the best strippers on the market. So we got those roughly even. We're just going to tighten our copper strands up. Now we're going to start with, let's figure out, I think I want the female side on the motor, male side going back to the board. It really doesn't matter. But we are going to start on the motor side. We'll put these female strands in place. And we're just going to insert those, as you can see, till we're just kind of flush to the end of where that copper starts to be stripped back for our square crimps or the square teeth. And then we want to make sure we have plenty of outer sheathing or insulation, for those teeth to grab onto. Now we could just take a pair of needle nose or some kind of pliers. And I did slip out of there, so we're gonna hopefully this shows up. We're just gonna kind of start on one side, bend that tooth over, go to the other side, bend that tooth over. They can overlap or they can go side to side. And then you can kind of square everything up from the sides. Well, it might be a little hard to see on camera. But we kind of want to keep these sides parallel because our crimper is still going to come in here and kind of crush that and crimp that. But the reason you want to pre-crimp it, if you just went straight on with a crimper, stuck this in your ratcheting crimper, a lot of times these thinner teeth, they don't really roll form as well as the wider ones. Sometimes they go off to the side or get all crushed over, and they don't really close and stay clean like they need to. So now we've got that pre-crimped on the one side. It may also help to kind of pinch the square crimps together just a little bit. Kind of straighten them out so that they fit in your ratcheting crimper a little easier. Sometimes they're flared out too much and they don't really want to go in. So open side to open side. Just squeeze till it clicks. And now we've got a perfect, very solid and sturdy crimp. Now you can add some solder in there if you feel the need to. I really don't think it would benefit anything. And if there's just a little bit of sheathing, you know, on one side of that, that's all the better. It's just, you know, that much more secure. Just as long as your copper's touching and has continuity. So that'll be a really good solid connection. And go ahead and take our male pin out. And we'll go to the next one. This might end up being kind of a long video. You guys feel free to fast forward. Since we stripped everything pretty much the same, there's really not a whole lot of reason to kind of put our little depth stopper in there every time, but better safe than sorry. And start on one side, go to the other, and kind of square it up. Kind of hugs that outer sheath. Pinch these in just a little, not too much, just enough that they fit smoothly into your crimper. And then let your tool do the work. And you want to make sure you're all the way in the die, not sticking out. So again, just a nice easy crimp. Perfect every time. As I think I started to say, there are different kind of higher quality barrel and, you know, female and male pins like this. Just the straight connector pins that you can get. They are sold separately. They are nice to use, but they do require a slightly different crimper, one that actually crimps from all sides at once. And those typically run you about like $35 to, you know, $45 or more. I think Knipex even makes one. It's a little on the expensive side, but it crimps from all sides. If you're doing this kind of work a lot, I'd recommend that. If you're just kind of DIYing things on the weekend and you still want a decent connection, this is, you know, perfectly serviceable. Straighten those out a little. Just make sure you're not catching your other wires in the crimpers when you're doing this. It's looking pretty professional. And the more even and lined up everything is to begin with, you know, the better time you'll have when we're going to insert our outer housing. So keep that in mind. I think I'll just show you guys the female side. The male is pretty much identical. You don't really need to put the connections together because the male will have a depth stop kind of built into it. I'm going to show a little bit of that in a moment. Maybe we'll do one. We'll see. Okay, now we got all 4 of our connections. Now for this connection, you know, we're going to have same colors going to same colors. You just want to bear in mind what side is what. And I think I said this backwards. I said I was going to put the female on the motor side. I put the female pins on the motor side. That's actually the male connector, but that's fine. So we're going to do red to number 1, and this is arbitrary. You can kind of do whatever you like. We're not going to push them all the way in just yet, just because of how tight this is. It's a little easier. You know, if you do it a little bit at a time. So white to number 2. Do green for number 4. And black for number 3. Let me just verify it. I did 1 extension cable already. Make sure that's how I did it. Yeah. So now we're just going to work these in. Kind of one side at a time. You'll see them kind of start guiding their own way in. Wiggle it a little bit. And they go all the way on this side to the end. So they're kind of flushed up there like so. Now we're going to take this guy. Slides right in. This one's done. We'll keep going. We're 17 minutes in. If you guys just, for thoroughness sake. Obviously, you want to be careful not to cut your inner sheathing when you're stripping these. And again, you could add solder, you could add heat shrink, tape. Not really necessary, especially with the crimp connections. They're nice and solid, sturdy. And these connectors go together very well. So again, about 3/8 of an inch or so. If you strip too much, you could always trim your copper. Now for the male side, never fails. I mean, never. Male side, you can even leave it just a little bit longer if you want, because you can go a little farther into this rolled pin. And we're just making sure we're gonna kind of go right to the end of the copper on the square tooth, and the thinner ones we just want to grab well on our outer sheathing or insulation. Do enough of these, you start getting a little faster at it. Right, that one's good. If anybody made it the full 20 minutes, I apologize. I know this is kind of slow and boring and monotonous. And some people like watching this kind of thing. Again, for anybody who might want to complain, there is a fast forward and a skip button. Square them up. Okay, we are just a little flared out. And by the way, this is like a cheap set of crimpers. But they do the job. Again, you could pay any range of prices for this style or the other style, you know, that crimps from all sides. I think normally it's like 4 sides. I think I've seen some up to like even 6 or 8 sides. Good pair of needle nose. Will make this a lot easier too. Just kind of form that around there. Close that up. All right, last pin. Hopefully most of this was in frame. I really haven't been looking. Again, if you overlap just a little of the end of that sheathing or the rubber or plastic or whatever kind of wire you're using for that insulation, it's not a huge deal as long as you're getting good contact with your copper. You typically do want to use stranded conductors for these, just FYI. I just forget sometimes to close these. So we'll close those a little bit so they fit better. Try to leave some links in the description as well on where to get some of these tools and the parts. And again, we want our colors to line back up, so same as before, start your red on 1, white 2, black 3, green 4. And if you mess up, these are removable, but it can be a pain. Kind of wiggle them in there. Now these will be a little more recessed than the other. Try not to break your wires. And you will hear a click sometimes, or you'll feel a click. Just want to look. I know the lighting's not too great here. See if I can turn a little more light. That probably helps a little. You can kind of see how those fit in there. There's kind of like a female cavity that matches that pin or socket. And you could always give a little tug, make sure they're not coming back out. Now this guy, because it's in a little farther, easiest way, there's some recesses here. Grab them with your needle nose. Just push in until it clicks. Make sure your pins are still kind of square and straight. And these are tapered on one side, so it helps guide them in as well. But there you go, perfect serviceable connection. Make sure there's no stranded copper hanging out the backs. You know, I could add tape or reinforcement if I need to, heat shrink, whatever. But this will work just fine. Then when I'm ready to disconnect, they just pull right out. Click back in. So that's it, guys. This is a DT Deutsch connector, waterproof, dustproof. That took us about half an hour, you know, while I'm sitting here explaining it. You do a few of them, you can get it faster if you're not talking and trying to show every step. They're quite a bit faster as well. But it is kind of a one and done. You know, this was no solder, no heat shrink, just straight on. You can use these for automotive purposes, anywhere where you're connecting, disconnecting stuff. You know, they are mostly dust and waterproof. I don't know that I'd submerge them or anything, depending on the environment. I don't know if they're quite UV rated for outside or anything, but for something like this, it's perfectly serviceable and should last for years. And they're relatively inexpensive. So I hope that helped, guys. I know there's plenty of other tutorials and videos how to do this, but I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring on it. Maybe you guys learned a couple things that maybe some of the other guys don't talk about. So that's it, guys. As always, I thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.